Welcome back to Audio Trends TV. Today we've got a special one for you. We're going to take a look at the madVR Envy. Now we've got one of the specialists in who knows all about it, and you're going to learn everything there is to know. Now we're also going to show you the physical differences on the image to see if it's worth the money. So let's get straight into it. So first let's hear from our expert Tony, and he's going to tell you all the details you need to know about the madVR. But if you don't want to watch this part and you just want to see the differences, there'll be a time code down below to skip to that part of the video. Let's take a look.
What we're looking at with the madVR is we're looking at a few key points as the madVR is taking over as the brains of the system. So every image you're doing, every image you're feeding it is doing several things. So it's applying sharpening, it's making the image look better. It's also doing aspect ratio management, HDR mapping, and it's adding some advanced calibration functions as well. And that's just scratching the surface. So if you look at some of the biggest challenges with 4K HDR today in projection, one of the most annoying things we see is we see aspect ratio management. And if you've got a 16:9 screen, you're probably not too worried. But if you've got a screen like this, which is great, so we've got a 2.35 screen, which we can fill on 2.35 material. But when you come to something that's changing aspect ratios, and I think a cracker, a recent one was Marvel Eternals. They go nuts. It's like every 15 to 20 seconds. Now, what would typically happen on a screen like this, as you know, if you've got it set up, you'd have to manually change it. And obviously with a movie like that, it's not going to happen. So what happens with the madVR is you're able to map those aspect ratios to fit the screen. So it's able to automatically adjust. So it's got a buffer, so it's looking ahead in the scenes. It's actually seeing what's happening, so it can size that perfectly. So if you've got a 2x35, 2.4 image, we went in before, we told the madVR how big the screen was, and we actually set the boundaries of the screen, so it knows exactly what it's got to work with. So it'll fit that 16:9 image perfectly on the screen. 2.4, 2.3 IMAX, it'll change them automatically. So there's no manual intervention on the user's part. Now, tying in with that, there's a little function called NonLinear Stretch. Now, what NonLinear Stretch is designed to do, we've all played around with stretch to varying effects. To be honest, I'm not a big fan of stretch or stretching any image, no matter how good it is. But there is a place for it. So with a screen like this, some customers will want to watch 16:9 where it fills the screen. So a classic example of that is sports, footy game, whatever the case may be. And that's perhaps a case I would watch something in NLS. So what we're able to do with this machine is we're able to stretch the image. NonLinear Stretch works on it's a smart algorithm. So being non-linear, it will apply more stretch to the edges of the screen and to the tops and bottoms of the screen, depending on how it's set up, so that you don't get that massive distortion from people. So if you see people, they're not extraordinarily skinny or extraordinarily wide either. So it takes care of all that. Some people will use it, and tying back to where we were going with the automatic aspect ratio, you can set it up in a couple different ways. So if we had, for example, Eternals, we may say we want to, when it flicks aspect ratio, we want it to show us the actual aspect. So we want to see the IMAX. When it goes white, we want to see wide. You can do that. That's in its natural aspect ratio. However, what we can also do if we want is we can have that image filling the screen the whole time. So there's no aspect ratio changes there whatsoever. So that's one of the beauties of a machine like this, particularly particularly on 2.35, 2.40 screen. Now, going back to what I was saying before, the purists like me who like to see it in that actual aspect ratio, some people find it actually takes them out of the film. They see that change and it's a distraction for them. And because it's doing it instantaneously with that stretch function where we're able to fill the whole screen, you just switch off. You've got a constant image height there. Well, you've got a constant image size there, I should say, without any pesky changes. The other big challenge for projection is HDR. So when we talk HDR, we're talking a standard which has been designed for televisions. Televisions obviously go much brighter, and you've probably heard of nits before. So if you're talking the standard, which is, say, we'll use 1,000 nits for argument's sake, which a lot of materials mastered at. So TV goes to 1,000 nits. This projector in here, on a screen like this, we're looking at around about, just a smidge under, I've measured it before, around about 95, 100 nits. So we're considerably less. So we think about, well, what happens to all that data? Typically all that data is being clipped or thrown away. Projectors will try and do their best job of managing that as possible. So they'll try and hang on to as much of that data as they can. But obviously it's not feasible. Enter a machine like this one will actually remap those values for you, and it'll do a sensational job at it. The guys who work on this are like the mad scientist, if you will. So what they can actually do, I've seen video processors on screens which do 50 nits, and they perceptually, they look a lot brighter because of the HDR tone mapping on there. So that's the beauty of one of those things, getting HDR material to look good. You know, I've got clients who will watch their HDR, sometimes in SDR, because I don't like the look of it on the projectors. Tone mapping or dynamic tone mapping is getting a lot better, and that's what a machine like this is doing. It's reading the incoming metadata. It's also making its own decisions independent of that metadata to put out the right image with the right amount of depth, contrast, etc. For your tinkerers, this is the beauty of this machine. This machine's designed for tinkerers. So if you look at the menus, if you go into the HDR menu, for example, you've got something there called looks. You've got things like punchy, bright, natural. These all affect how the HDR image looks. In there also, we tell the, and sorry, I'm stepping back a little bit. In there also, we tell the madVR the peak brightness of the projector. That way it's able to make the best decisions about tone mapping. But those looks, thanks Vinay.
I'm going to head off. I'll see you guys later.
Nice to see you. So those looks affect how HDR looks on screen. Now, most people aren't going to want to mess with those, but clients who do want to play with them, they're able to change them at will. And there's things in there, there's things like, you know, like I was saying before, there's punchy, bright, etc. You can just experiment with them. And if you don't like what you've done, they're changed to the temp layer until the client actually, or the calibrator, actually specifies that they're a base layer chain. So you can change them on the fly if you want to. They're very easy to find your way around. Now, the other thing, a couple other things that this machine's doing on the way in, it's also rescaling and sharpening images. So that's something which happens in the background. And look, today I'm not really doing justice on this. It's a toolbox or a sandpit, if you will. There's a lot of tools that can be used there. One of the tools I'm typically using as a calibrator when I go out is the calibration side of things. Now, when we talk about calibration, we're typically talking 2-point white balance, basic gamma controls, 6-point color management system. This will be a bit clearer in a sec. Now, if you look at monitors and calibration for people who are actually mastering content, what they're doing is they're using the gold standard, which is what's called a LUT. or a lookup table. So just to give you an idea, when we go in, we look at grayscale, gamma. When rather than looking at those 2-point controls, we're looking at 20 to 33 different points. That actually enables us to get an extremely good result, very, very good colour accuracy, and a nice sense of depth, or that pop to images that we're all looking for. The other thing is, when we look at colour management, we look at 6-point controls on a system like this, like we're looking at you know, pretty much every other projector or TV out there. When a LUT calibration comes into it, we're looking at around 5,000 points. So it's quite incredible what it's able to do. So yeah, and what you'd expect to see after a calibration of a machine like this is you'd expect to see extremely lifelike images, images that pop, that are sharp, have a good sense of depth. What we're about creating that Hollywood standard, the very same standard the directors see when they master the content, as well, of course, as getting the best image possible for each installation. So that's just a quick gloss over.
First off, welcome to Grand Royal Cinema 1. It's in our showroom in Ringwood, Melbourne, Victoria, Australia. And you're welcome to come down and have a look. It's a pretty impressive showroom. And this theatre is one of our favourites because of the amazing sound that we've got in here, using clipped speakers behind the screen. So it is very dark in this room at the moment. It's for obvious reasons. We're trying to highlight the screen here and just show you the difference between tone mapping turned on and tone mapping turned off. The automatic resizing is already set to this screen, and it's happening as we speak through this movie. This is a fantastic scene to demo just how well tone mapping does work with the HDR settings. This is out of the Batman. I'll click play here and pause it right there. So this scene highlights the Penguin. Now you can see here, there's a lot of brightness around him here. He's also got a bit of light on his face, and this side of his face is in darkness. You can also see some detail around the edges there on either side. Now we'll just go into the settings of the madVR. And here it is. So we've got a simple on-off switch for the tone mapping or HDR settings. If I turn that to off, once it's done, you'll immediately see the difference. There we go. So now that tone mapping's off, you can really see a significant difference in this image. There's hardly any light on his face here. His face is actually barely distinguishable. You've got very limited visibility of his shoulder here on both sides, as you can see, and way less detail, and there's absolutely almost nothing on the sides here. So we'll flick back to it being turned on again, just so you can get a good reference. And look at that. There really is no comparison, it's just significant. Around the edge, so much more light and details. His shoulders are clearly defined, the face is now clearly defined. You've got a bit of a glow behind the head. It's just amazing, the difference. We'll play it and I'll let it run through another scene. To this scene here. Here we go. Okay, this part here. So, looking at this image again, brightness behind the smoke. You can see Batman obviously sitting in the car there, and a lot of detail inside the vehicle, around the edges as well. In this area, you can see all the details of buildings on either side. And then let's turn the tone mapping settings off and just see what we used to live with. This is with nothing. This is the way that the projector comes from Sony. There you go. Still can see him. You can still see a little bit of detail in here, but it's not as sharp or defined. The edges are a lot darker on either side. You can hardly see any detail around the bottom here on this edge. There's barely anything there. So it really is quite a dark image, and it's almost hard to see what's actually happening in the movie, which is sort of the whole point of a movie, to see what's happening. So let's just do that again. Turn it back on. And there you go. Now you can actually see that there is smoke. You can see the ground here. You can see these objects off to the side. You can see it's a brick wall. See all that detail. Again, more detail on the left. This becomes a little bit brighter. The colors become a little bit more accurate as to how the director would have wanted them to look. And it really just does give you the most authentic image you could want out of your projector. Hopefully that's been enough. I'll let this play for you. Another significant thing, as you can see there with this flashing, it's extreme brights and extreme darks, which is what you want because that's high contrast and it's giving you like a more lifelike, accurate image. Just for fun, I'll pause that and I'll wind back. Look at that. Completely different. Looks a little bit washed out almost. So much darker, the flashes aren't as bright. And you're just getting nowhere near as much detail as you get with the HDR tone mapping turned on. There you go. So, bottom line is, the madVR gives you a much more detailed, color accurate, and contrast accurate image. You're going to get darker blacks, brighter whites, and just a more accurately displayed image. And really, it's going to give you the most out of your projector. So if you bought a cheaper projector or even a more expensive one, it's going to significantly increase the image quality of the projector. So in terms of settings on the madVR, it's designed to be consumer focused. There is other products that do the same thing as madVR, or very similar I should say, but they're nowhere near as consumer focused as madVR is. It's just so simple to set up that the average person could do it. And frankly, if it's not simple to set up and it's not easy to use, it's not going to be a good product. That's why we really like madVR. So taking a look, for example, at the HDR settings, you have simple settings. So there's an on and off simply. There's the look of it. There's punchy, vivid, natural, all different settings there to get the image just the way you like it. We found through our testing that a punchy setting gives us the best image. Customers have also thought so too. Vivid is also good, but it generally can make it look a little bit too bright and unrealistic. But for cartoons and those kind of things, that's a fantastic setting. And just going through the other settings, you've got simple options. So you've got highlight recovery, contrast recovery, shadow recovery, high, insane, mild, low. It's all simple and it's just tuned to be able to get it exactly the way you like it. And the same goes for the remapping and linear stretching. It all just works really simply and can be done through simple settings. Now, although the settings are fairly simple in the madVR, if you're wanting the absolute best out of your projector and the madVR, it's worth getting someone like Tony out to set it up for you, because he can calibrate it to the highest standard and it really will give you the best looking image. That's what we did here, and we've been amazingly happy with the image and it looks fantastic. But honestly, we were so impressed with madVR because you hear about these things and you think, oh yeah, it might do a little bit of brightness or a little bit of color calibration to the image. It might make it slightly better, but this is a significant difference. So we all believe that if you add this to your existing projector, it's worth it. If it's a high-end one or if it's even a cheaper one and you don't want to upgrade the projector, this is a fantastic way to get more out of your current projector. So in terms of settings, that is all we are going to go through today. But if you would like a more in-depth look into the settings of madVR or even some more demo clips of just the differences of how it looks, let us know down in the comments below. And we'd like to say a massive thank you to Tony from Clarity Calibration. His website link is down below and it is claritycalibration.com.au. Thanks Tony, and thank you guys for watching Audio Trends TV, and as always, I'll catch you later.